Welcome to Reparenting Daily, your free daily guide for inner child healing and repairing the relationship with yourself. This podcast helps you establish a consistent reparenting routine and is divided into 3 sections. The first is the daily reading, the second is a discussion of the reading, followed by suggested journal prompts, and the last section is peaceful binaural beats meditation for closing. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from whenever and wherever you're joining us. I'm so glad that you could join us on this journey of self-expansion. If this is your first time here, welcome. As a celebration of passing episode 700, I've opened a free membership tier for the Patreon community so you can access additional resources and join the weekly Zoom calls for free. I know there's a lot going on in the world right now and that so many people are really struggling. My hope here is to still encourage others to continue the work on reparenting and to offer a free community where people can come together and do that. I'd also like to thank all of you who've been along on the journey so far. Just as a reminder, this is a free podcast, but you can support the project by purchasing the Reparenting Daily Journal, where you can follow us along all year. This 333-page journal gives you extra insight and resources for each week, and also provides space for you to keep your notes. Another way to support the podcast is to purchase the Fairy Tales for Reparenting series, volumes 1 through 3. This collection organizes famous and obscure fairy tales from around the world into the 3 phases of the hero's journey. While you might think that fairy tales are for kids, I'd like to challenge you. These stories contain profound truths and lessons carried down over millennia that we can use in our reparenting journey. It's a fun way to reconnect with your inner child. Each volume comprises 10 fairy tales. They include an analysis section to help you dive deeper into the message, as well as journal prompts and space to reflect on the story's meaning in your life. Lastly, you can also support the project by taking a paid Patreon subscription, by purchasing the books on the website, or by donating via Buy Me a Coffee. You can find all this information on the Support Us section of the website. So now, with these announcements out of the way, let's dive into today's practice. Today, we're going to be listening to a portion of a video entitled Connecting with Your Inner Child by the Being Well podcast. It's hosted by Dr. Rick Hansen, who is a quite popular or famous psychologist. He hosts this podcast with his son. It's a really great show, so check it out. We'll only listen to a portion of it today. Just as a reminder, we're in August now. The theme for this month is Healing the Inner Child. We're in week 1, and the theme for this week is Connecting with Your Inner Child. Excuse me, getting a bit sick today. So I've selected this video because it's a great introduction and really more than an introduction, sort of quite an in-depth introductory discussion into connecting with your inner child, the different versions of your inner children. Of course, if you've been listening to this show for some time, you're not new to this concept. And so they do share some more concepts, insights that might be new to you, even if you've been on this journey for a while, because it is quite a longer episode. So I really do recommend checking it out in its entirety. But I wanted to remind you and encourage you this month as we move through August to take some time to connect with all of the versions of your inner children, not just the afraid inner child or the angry teenager or whatever versions you're dealing with, but make a conscious effort to address the versions of yourself, your childhood self, that might not come up to mind so easily at first, because they're still a part of you, they're still within you as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and listen to Rick Hansen and his son.
One of the most common topics that we've explored on the podcast is developmental psychology, how what happened to us as a child can influence our lives today. Those childhood events often have a huge impact on our nature and behavior, even in adulthood. And sometimes becoming increasingly happy and healthy as an adult is about unwinding the influence of negative events that happened during childhood. But alongside that, there can be a lot of value in connecting more with the person who we authentically were when we were young. There might be a sense for you of some kind of core nature, something that was present for you before the world started getting in the way. So today we're going to be exploring that child self and how it might help us become more fully realized as adults. So to help us do that, I'm joined today, as usual, by Dr. Rick Hansen. So Dad, how are you doing today?
I'm good, and I've been very much looking forward to this topic, which has a lot of personal meaning for me in terms of my own childhood, my own inner child, or layers of inner children inside me. And also, of course, because I knew you when you were a child, and I've also worked with a lot of children. So this topic has a lot of meaning. And I was just thinking there for a moment, Forrest, when you were talking about the setup here, in Buddhist psychology, there are these 5 major so-called hindrances that hinder our progression in practice, such as angry ill will against others or self-doubt. And the deep root of the word that's translated as hindrances actually means coverings. These are things that cover over our underlying good nature, including the underlying sweet, innocent, beautiful, wise, innermost childlike being that still resides within each of us.
Yeah, I think that's something that's been really present for me over the last, particularly over the last maybe 5 years, but honestly, for most of my adult life, I think that there are ways in which I've been almost trying to rediscover or get back to, in some way, the person that I was when I was pretty young, when I was, 3, 4, 5 years old. Like I said in the introduction, before the world started pushing back on me in ways that made me feel uncertain or insecure or started editing core parts of my behavior or, geez, even my nature in some kind of real way. Um, that weren't really the way that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Like these things kind of popped out of me behaviorally in response to stuff that was going on out in the world. And now that I'm an adult and there can be this more kind of active creational element of who you want to be in the world, I'm looking at some of those behaviors and I'm going, man, maybe kid me knew a lot more than adult me does right now.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of the process that I've been going through. And I think that's probably resonant for a lot of people.
Yeah, there's this process of reclaiming, re-inhabiting. There's a place for regulating some of, let's say, our younger. I like that word, younger. The younger layers of our being. Some of them, like have a deep, deep background in the 0 to 3 time frame of development, when from birth to roughly the 3rd birthday, and then certainly onward. And yeah, there's a place for regulation and self-regulation. But wow, there's such a difference between regulation through guidance and encouragement compared to regulation through alarmist, fault finding, and squelching or muzzling of the inner child within us, or who we were as children, literally squelching from our peers, our parents, our older siblings, sometimes other kinds of authority figures. And there's a lot of also cultural ideology about it. It's interesting, Forrest. I don't know if you know this detail
Mm-hmm.
about my own dissertation, which was about responding to the
No, actually
problematic.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, my dissertation was on offering alternatives to toddlers rather than just saying no. So there's a collision between the wants of the kid, the wants of the parent. Everything's groovy when there's no collision, right? But when there's a difference, toddler wants the steak knives, and that's a little dangerous. So dad, mom, whoever says, not the steak knives. How about these cool spoons? Or how about you help me make the cookies? And so you're guiding them in a different direction. I called it gratifying control. So it's this meeting that has thoroughly interested me, including currently in my work on relationships, of love and power woven skillfully together, right? But one of the really interesting things about that, when I did the dive into the child development literature, including psychoanalytic literature and cultural literature, like how children were regarded, there was a tremendous framing, certainly within the West. I'll just leave it at that. European, Eurocentric, and also in America, this view of the child as a savage, a kind of disgusting savage who needed the controlling force of civilization in the form of parental punishment, maybe, to get them to suppress their desires, which were nasty and dirty and bad, and so that they could behave properly. There was that view of children, and we're still dealing with, I think, a fair amount of cultural residues of that fundamental view of kids, which is just wrong in terms of both biology and psychology. It's just wrong.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great summary of a pretty complicated territory for a lot of people. You could definitely situate this culturally a little bit, although I can only speak to my own culture, which is a pretty like Western Eurocentric, like you were saying, perspective. But I think that you're totally right that we often view children as having these inappropriate impulses that they need to suppress, to just summarize what you were saying there. And it's the job of society at large to hold those impulses down so that these more kind of top-down, highly cognitive processes can take place for the betterment of both the child and for the betterment of the society as a whole. But a lot of the time, what ends up happening is that we start censoring ourselves and we start censoring these very earnest and pure parts of our self-expression because we are told over and over again, no, that is wrong, that is bad. Why would you do that? But a lot of the time, those things are actually our most authentic impulses. And they are, coincidentally, conveniently, the things that also bring us an enormous amount of joy in this lifetime. So, they're both good for you psychologically, and they're perfectly fine most of the time out in the world when you are freed from the boundaries of like your middle school rule set, to kind of put it that way. Um, so you've actually written a lot about why somebody might want to tap into a younger version of themselves. We've talked about it a little bit already, but I would like to kind of start there. What's somebody actually doing when we talk about this, other than in kind of this very theoretical cognitive way that we've talked about it so far, how there might be some kind of implicit value there. But what could somebody do to get a sense of that younger, more earnest part of themselves, maybe?
Well, one is to listen to the deeper layers or feel down in your reactions. So, for example, this is a current example. So sometimes, um, you know, people, including once in a while, people or a person I'm married to, but anyway, will warn me or will bring a certain alarm that we really got to get going or I really got to do something. Okay. And it's well intended. It's fundamentally loving and so forth. And I'm aware of my immediate reaction of, well, why are you telling me this? I'm doing fine already. We're going to get where we got to go perfectly on time, or whatever it is I'm doing. Mowing the yard. I'm mowing the yard just fine. I'm doing the dishes just fine. Something like that. But very quickly, I can be aware of the ways in which that stimulus hits a kind of internal turbocharger that takes what might be on the 0 to 10, slightly inappropriate world landing on us scale of a 1. And then it hits this turbocharger in which I grew up with parents who were very loving and decent and who were also very alarmist and fault finding and controlling and suppressing about things that were just not a problem, really, just not a problem. And so then those reactions from childhood get stirred up. They get reactivated. They get triggered. The brain is an associational mechanism. So one of the very useful things people can do is to feel down into these younger layers, including, let's say, the younger layer. In my case, I could speak of it and feel a kind of little Ricky inside, this little 6-year-old or 8-year-old or 4-year-old who feels what? Who feels kind of shocked. I'm good. I'm a good boy. I was just trying to help. It's all okay. Or why am I bad? It doesn't make sense. I want people to recognize that what I'm doing is okay, or at least help me without all this anger. You can feel the longings. And one of the guides to this is they feel more at the core of your being. There's a softer simplicity in them. It's not that conceptual. Children are not really conceptual typically till they start approaching their teens. It's more sensory. It's more fundamental. It's concrete. It's, I'm a good boy. I'm a good boy. Why are you talking to me like I'm a bad boy when I'm not a bad boy? It's very simple. And in it, you can feel this longing for closeness, longing to feel safer, longing to feel appreciated. In other kinds of contexts, the longing to feel protected, to feel that others are sticking up for you. So this process of kind of feeling down into younger layers. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily agree with them. Some of the longings of a child are just unrealistic in adulthood for perfect responsiveness, let's say, from other people. We don't have caregivers typically in adulthood like we need in early childhood. But there's a sense of the goodness and the all rightness of these under feelings inside. And something really happens when you open up to them. And I've known a lot of people who have a really hard time just doing what I just did here, tuning in a allyship kind of way, being an ally to the younger layers of your own psyche, right? That's actually quite hard for many people because they've internalized what the world did to them. So if the world shamed or pushed away or pushed down those younger parts, they often internalize that and do it to themselves. And so one of the pieces of the journey here is to overcome those understandable but still problematic tendencies in oneself so you can sit more in this kind of quality of being almost like a good parent today to the younger layers of your being.
I think that's really lovely. I was talking with a friend recently who I know some of my friends actually do, in fact, listen to the podcast, so I'm just trying to remove identifying details here. But he was kind of going through some stuff in their life where they're encountering these questions about how they want to relate to a particular kind of thing, to put it really generally. And so I asked them a question where I said, well, do you feel like you can kind of get in touch with what you would have wanted when you were a kid, or maybe what your core nature was when you were a long younger? And they responded to me, honestly, I don't feel like I have a great sense for it, exactly like you were saying. They basically said, I don't know who that person was. I don't have a great memory for what I was like when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I think that this is really common. I think a lot of people really struggle to connect to that person. Um, for a lot of different reasons, some of which might be functional, memory based. They didn't take a lot of pictures when they were a kid. They don't have a lot of home videos floating around. Maybe it's somebody who's a little bit on the older side. So just like having a handy cam at home was not really a thing. Or it might be more psychological defense oriented. Maybe there's something there that feels unpleasant to contact. Maybe it feels very vulnerable. Maybe it feels very unsafe in some way. And that's all just to reaffirm or to affirm what you were saying a second ago about the challenges that some people have in contacting this younger material. So I do think that that can, as you were saying, be a really helpful question. Do you have a feeling for what you were like or for what that person might have wanted? Just at the core, not so much in the idealistic child way, as you were saying. Some child idealism is not realistic as an adult, but just in like a core values kind of way. Like, were you more of a somatic person or were you more of a kind of cognitive person? Were you a really intense feeler or did you not really like that kind of stuff so much? Did you want to be in contact with people or did you kind of want to be on your own? And you can just kind of run through a series of questions. And when you start to see big differences between that younger version and the person you are now, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you now, but it could be just a place for some fruitful inquiry around, is that something that you want to have more contact with or less as you continue to age?
You bet. One of the most powerful therapeutic techniques I know, and people can just do it generally. I would ask clients to get a hold of whatever you can, 30 pictures of your childhood, going as far back as you possibly can. And then we would just look at the pictures and you would see even the most intellectual. Sometimes what I would do is I would hold my hand over everything except the face of someone. And I would just say, what do you see in that face? Maybe it was the face of their mother, their grandmother, or themselves, or their father, let's say, whatever. And what do you see there? And what can you remember of that time, or what was happening in that time? So you're exploring that. And an interesting question too is, when do you see the face change? Like in my face, honestly, you can see this young, sweet boy, wide open, really interested in the world. And by the time that boy is 9 or 10, that face is guarded, careful, watchful, and very oriented around never, ever, ever making a mistake. And then me, you have the class picture when I was a freshman in high school, and I was however old I was maybe 12 as a freshman, and it's in Latin Club, and there's a bleacher full of, I don't know, 150 kids. I went to a big high school who were looking at the camera, except there's one kid in the front row all the way to the end of one front row who's looking off to the side as that picture is taken, and that kid is me. So you can see a lot when you go back and look, and that's one way into getting in touch with things. Another is to ask people, if you can, especially before they are no longer here, just what was happening, kind of autobiographically, no praise, no blame, no criticism. And you learn amazing things. Like suddenly you hear that, there were 2 or 3 miscarriages before you were born and you were absolutely wanted. You were desperately wanted. In my case, let's say. On the other hand, you might hear, oh, wow, your mom got pregnant when you were 4 months old and fairly quickly went into really serious morning sickness while your dad was still finishing his PhD in zoology in Arizona. And wow, that has a lot of implications. You start suddenly understanding things, or you start hearing stories about a move that needed to occur or an injury. You never knew that you fell off your bike and had a really, really serious concussion when you were 4 years old. And that might explain some of the stuff you're dealing with now as a 44-year-old. And maybe there's something you could do about it. So recreating your childhood, that can be really, really valuable to you. Or even just kind of inferring certain things from details, especially as an adult, you start having an appreciation for what it must have been like for your parents, let's say, when you were young, because they had to hold down 2 jobs, or they worked the night shift as well, or there was a lot of anger, or, you hear that your dad drank a lot. He doesn't anymore, but he used to drink a lot. Like, oh, and that's all really, really good information for kind of reclaiming the truth of how it was for you.
Yeah, I think that's something that we could do here if you're up for it, is that I could almost kind of talk through what I've been kind of feeling into recently in my own process,
That'd be
as we've
great.
already sort of started
Yeah.
to do here. Yeah, and then maybe you could kind of tell me what you think is going on there, give any additional commentary that you want to toss in, both from your perspective as my parent, of course, which we could do that part, but I really mean in kind of more of a general way that people could use to apply this sort of a process to their own life if they're interested in that. So to start with, I think that there's been this increasing process over the last couple of years here of trying to tune into that younger version of myself. And when I say younger, I'm really talking about the version that maybe existed when I was like 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. Um, More playful, more open, less serious, a little bit more light, a little bit less bothered. Um, I think that kids have a remarkable capacity for resilience, even as they are quite sensitive about some specific things. It's the old line about please don't do this. This is a joke. But if you throw a kid out of a window, they'll bounce, as opposed to like an older person, you
Don't
throw
do
them out
that.
of a window, they splat. There's kind of a different, please don't do this,
Yeah.
but it's a joke, It's that idea of that snapping back, particularly psychologically, even though we do know, of course, that those early years have enormous consequence down the line, particularly in terms of traumatic experiences. But I think it's just true that kids can handle a lot and get used to a lot. If you see particularly the behavior of children in developing countries who are in enormously restricted, enormously traumatic circumstances, and their ability to survive regardless. So elements of that. A big thing for me is just kind of lightening up around a lot of stuff, having this experience of a younger person who was more playful and kind of more relaxed, more emotionally open and kind of authentically uncovered with other people because they're not as worried about getting kind of negative stimuli from them back. Just as you were saying, I went through this big process. I think it was pre-COVID, maybe 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, of looking at a bunch of pictures and videos of myself when I was really quite young, and having just a really interesting emotional process around it, where a lot of it was really like heartfelt and soulful and sweet. And there were some moments where I just saw, 8-year-old Forrest doing something. And I kind of felt like almost ashamed of it, like I was applying my 33-year-old brain to the behavior of the 7-year-old kid or whatever, in a way that, logically I know isn't appropriate. But it's interesting how that feeling can kind of boil up there. And then you can reckon with it. You can go, where's this coming from? Why do I feel this way? How have I internalized some kind of shame cycle around this particular behavior? And do I still want to be that way in the future? And what can I do to change that? So that's the process that I've been going through myself. Maybe alongside that is this idea of like core desires and core values. When I was talking to that friend recently, it was really oriented around this question of how do you want to be and what do you really value? Because we internalize a lot of messages when we're young about whether or not something is quote unquote like a good thing, right? Um, but those are all messages by and large that we're getting from other people. We're not getting them internally as much. And often those external messages are going to conflict on some level with what we feel good doing inside of ourselves. But most of the time, for most kids, they're going to turn to the adults in the room to understand what's good and what's bad. And then we need to kind of re-legislate that when we're able to execute a little bit more top-down control and a little bit more certainty, a little bit more self-confidence in our own inner knowing. So that's a lot of what I've been doing. I'm not sure if that was consistent with any of your process that you've gone through these things, or if you have just kind of a general thought on it.
Well, it's of course very touching to hear you talk about this, and I'm going to try to keep my therapist hat on to some extent. Not that we're doing
I think that would
therapy
be
here,
great.
but just more just to bring that to bear, rather than
Yeah.
starting to cry here about feeling sad about how things happened for you when you were little, and as you would say, I think as well, you had a generally happy, comfortable childhood, but still, little things matter. Little things add up, and I think that's the key takeaway for many people. Affluent life, lots and lots of little things can really wear on a person.
Hey guys, I hope you're doing well, and I hope you enjoyed the portion of this video. As always, you can click on the link in the show notes to listen to it in its entirety. It's quite a long episode. They do longer discussions, so there's a lot more information packed in there. So, as we come back for the discussion and reflection section, I would like to just ask you to take some time to reflect on how did you feel about this episode? How did you feel about the discussions exploring developmental psychology, understanding or a reminder of just how much our past experiences molded us, how they created the way that we see the world and influenced the way that we behave and interact and express ourselves. It's so important that we do spend some time, if we haven't already, to understand parts of developmental psychology so that you're better able to contextualize your own experience. I spent a lot of time in the beginning intellectualizing, of course, because I'm a huge intellectualizer. And now I'm in this phase, or have been in this phase for some time now, of the emotional processing. But having the contextual understanding, at least for someone like myself, really, really did make a difference in allowing me to step forward with confidence and this emotional processing. It kind of like gives me some kind of I guess you could kind of say like a map, or I'm not sure the best way to express it, but not feeling so just completely lost and overwhelmed by the flooding of these emotions from experiences so long ago, but also having an understanding of what's going on and where I'm headed with the entire process. And so as we take some time to think of some reflection questions this week, number one, In which ways do you feel most connected to your inner child? Which version or which age inner child or inner children do you feel most connected to or most able to connect to at will? Number 2, do you have any outstanding questions about yourself or your life as a child that have really been on your mind or on the back burner, for example? Perhaps your parents have already passed, so you don't really have anyone to ask about certain questions about who you were, how things were in your past. So are there any of those questions lingering still that would help you improve your understanding and connection with your inner child? And number 3, since you've began this process of reparenting, so up until whichever point you began until now, the current day, what have been your benchmarkers for success? What progress have you made that you can see demonstrated in your beliefs, actions, thoughts, behaviors, and emotions? That's it for today. As always, thanks for being here. Take care of yourself and please do be well. Welcome back. Now, this is the third and final section of the daily podcast. This is your silent meditation. Please find a place where you can be comfortable and undisturbed, where you can relax and spend some time with yourself for the next 10 minutes. You can choose to be sitting, standing, lying down, or in whatever position makes you most comfortable today. Just take some time to listen to yourself. Next, be sure that you're taking time to be with your breath and to connect more fully with your body. Don't be disturbed or overwhelmed by your thoughts. Simply allow them to pass. Just observe them. Do not engage with your thoughts. Only be mindful of them passing, as if they are leaves drifting down top of a river. Use this time to connect with yourself, whatever time of day you are listening to this. Namaste.